Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 85 of the Pet Behavior Chat. And I actually can't believe it's episode 85 because I have a wonderful guest joining us who previously joined me for another episode, which was episode 43. So we're almost kind of like double episodes in. And so I'm so delighted to be chatting to the lovely Nikki McLeod again today, who is an RVN, so that's a registered veterinary nurse for those of you not based in the UK, who is in the process of doing something super exciting, which I can't wait to chat to her about. So welcome, Nikki, and thank you so much for joining me again.
Oh, thank you for inviting me back. I mean, quite an honour to be a repeat offender, if so. But no, it's lovely to always speak to you. So thank you so much for inviting me along.
Thank you, thank you. And so obviously I've given a little bit of a teaser of this exciting thing that you're doing. I would absolutely love it if you could chat us through what your new venture is and what you're up to and a little bit about your sort of initial experiences of how that's going.
Sure. So I'm going to try and not repeat too much from the last episode that I was on, but just a sort of brief summary is that I'm a registered veterinary nurse in the UK, in Scotland, just north of Edinburgh. I have been qualified for 25 years. My main passions are cat nursing, feline nursing, and dog and cat behaviour. And I am no spring chicken. I'm more nearer to my retirement age than I am to my leaving school age. So I've obviously had to think of the future and what I can do when I am hitting like sort of the final years of my career, which hopefully is a good another 10, 15 years or so. But at the age that I am now, obviously the body is not doing too well, but the mind is very active. I continue to be a study geek. And as I explained in the last episode, I was actually studying at the University of Edinburgh with the master's degree course in clinical animal behaviour. Happy to say, since the last time I spoke to you, I have graduated from
Woohoo!
University of Edinburgh. I did decide to step off after my second year. Lots of personal reasons. We had bereavement in the family, etc. last year, and it made it really difficult to have the mindset to continue, to be quite honest. And for what I need in order to build a behavioural service and be accredited with an association in the UK, I only needed my PGDIP, which is basically the first and the second year of a master's degree course. The third year is like your thesis, which I would love to have done, but yeah, it just wasn't suitable for me at that time. So quite happily stepped off. Happy to have walked across McCune Hall stage to receive my my diploma, postgraduate diploma, and pretty much the thoughts were from the minute I graduated was I wanted then to build a behavioural service. Now, a lot of people do tend to do that self-employed. I'm doing it slightly differently. I am remaining to be employed within the veterinary practice that I am employed at the moment. I am a consulting nurse. I work 3 days a week purely doing consulting. So that's front of house, client facing, doing various appointments like 6-month checks, second vaccinations, weight clinics, stuff like that. What I would like to do is eventually to come off the nursing rota and just purely do behaviour. So what I'm doing is I'm building a practice-based behavioural service, and it is a referral service because, again, typical me, I want to do things properly. I want to make sure that if I'm doing behaviour cases, they are referred from by a vet. Doesn't mean that clients can't self-refer, but it means that I basically have to work in collaboration with the vet that is referring it, because as we know, a lot of the behavioural cases can be obviously pain related, and that's certainly something that has been quite important to me, because I know because behaviour isn't regulated, anybody can call themselves a behaviourist in the UK. Anybody can call themselves as a veterinary nurse in the UK. So there's a lot of mirroring. There's a lot of crossover from the two professions, and that's where my passions lies, trying to bring both professions together. And we're trying, as a British Veterinary Nursing Association Council officer, I'm working with the BVNA to try and protect the title of veterinary nurse, and also I'm a Animal Behaviour and Training Council trustee. We are trying to get UCAS accredited, which means that obviously then behaviourist would be accredited, and nobody else can then use the title. So there's a lot going on, but certainly as far as the Behaviour Service is concerned, that has been up and running now for 5 months. So it's been quite a busy 5 months.
I bet. So tell me a little bit about this Behaviour Service. So that's really kind of what I'm trying to get to, because I think that's, you know, when I first heard that you were setting up a Behaviour Service, I was just so delighted, because I feel that this is such a valuable service, coming especially from a veterinary nurse, because I think there aren't enough veterinary behaviourists in the UK, in the world, let's face it. And having that, you know, that amazing touch point, that sort of almost like that bridge between the veterinary nursing profession, and then being able to recognize some of the things that could be contributing behavior, but that might be physical. And, you know, experienced veterinary nurses are so well placed to kind of bridge that gap between the two. And so tell me a little bit, like, what does that look like? How's it structured? You know, do you see dogs and cats? Like, how are you trying to sort of build that service at the moment?
Sure. So what I did after I graduated, I took a month. I'd already, before I graduated, started to build up a business proposal to my bosses, my line managers, clinical directors, etc. Because it would have been easy to have just said, right, I've got my postgraduate diploma, let's just go back into practice and let's try and fit in behaviour in between nursing. And this is where the issue is with a lot of veterinary professionals, is that they don't see behavioural medicine as something that is as important as, say, orthopedic or internal medicine, etc. It is, as you and I both know, it's something that we're both very passionate about. And I didn't want to just be 6 months, 1 year, 2 years down the line in the position that I am in just now, which is trying to fit in, but I'll explain why in a second. I'm getting frustrated because it's not just the behaviour appointment as such, as in the time that you spend with the client. There's a lot of research beforehand, there's report writing afterwards. So I knew this, obviously, because of my training through university, through other CPD that I'd done, is that it's not just turn up, talk to the client, send them away, that's it. There's a lot of work around the actual appointment itself. So I wanted to ensure that my line managers knew that this would be the case, but also to give me targets as well, because I'm very much a target-driven person. If I don't have deadlines, it doesn't become a priority. And when my to-do list is as long as mine, I need deadlines. So I set deadlines, and basically I graduated in November, and I wanted to build the first month of putting prices together, figuring out what type of appointments I would have. And then my business proposal then was to open the clinic in the December of last year, and to have targets to reach, as in when I would be looking to move over to just doing purely behaviour. So the first thing was trying to figure out appointments, because there's a vast variety of ways that you can do behaviour appointments. One thing I adamantly put my foot down for was with cat behaviour appointments, they would be by telemedicine. There is absolutely no need to bring a cat that has behavioural issues into the veterinary practice, because my clinic will purely be based within my practice that I work at. So I'm not going to be visiting people's homes, and it's not going to be out with my working hours at the vet practice. So that was the first thing I said straight off, was cat appointments will absolutely be by telemedicine. Now, if a client with a cat behavioural issue wanted to come and speak to me in person, that's not a problem, but I would not be asking them to bring the cat in, because most of the behavioural issues that you're seeing with cats are things like inappropriate urination in the house, inter-cat aggression, and bringing the cat into the practice, the cat's stressed because it's taken out of its own territory. It's not going to show the behaviours that you're wanting to discuss. So there is really no need in sitting the cat in a vet practice for an hour to 2 hours to talk about things that actually don't necessarily relate to the sentient being that is there in front of you. So that was one thing I absolutely said, was I'm going to be doing a lot of telemedicine. And a lot of people are like, kind of, is that like too fancy dancy? Well, no, COVID showed that it isn't. It's like, it's pretty much the norm now to a lot of people. Granted, some of the older generation may struggle with it, but again, that's why I would say to them, well, if you are struggling, we go through all the process, but then we can speak to each other face to face at the practice, but you do not bring your cat. But I have done a number of cat telemedicine appointments, and it has just been so successful because of that. With cats, again, it's very rare that I would have any sort of training to do with cats. So one thing that I did start to do was have an appointment for basic training, triage, behavioural health care type of scenario. And cats on the whole probably don't fit an awful lot into that, apart from maybe new kitten owners looking to set up their home. It's surprising me in my normal nursing job how many people don't realise that cats really shouldn't be fed twice a day, that cats should have more than one litter tray a day, one more litter tray in the house. Just all these things that are natural to me, but to your average cat caregiver, if they don't know any better, they just treat them like dogs. And as we all know, cats are not small dogs. They are a completely different species, and they need different species specific needs. So that may slightly fall into that triage training behavioural healthcare appointment, which is not a referral. And certainly when it comes to dogs, that's where that appointment has been used a number of times. And I'm looking at my diary for the next week. I've actually got 2 or 3 of these appointments coming up this week for things like muzzle training, for things like teaching your dog how to get his teeth brushed, how to stop a puppy jumping up, things like that. So very basic things that I don't need to go to a vet and say, please, can you refer? These are things that are client education, which is something I'm really, really strongly for, because I really do think that we need to educate them. If they don't know any better, they're not going to know better. So we absolutely have to turn around and say to clients and the caregivers of the pets, if you don't know, please let me teach you. So if somebody says to a vet or a nurse in the practice, oh my goodness, my puppy's jumping up at me all the time, instead of now referring them out to other puppy classes, which we still will continue to do, we can also say to them, but if you want a more personal one-to-one consultation, our behaviour nurse can offer you these appointments. So that's the sort of first basic appointment, is the training, triage, behaviour health care. And that's very short, usually in person, but again, as I say, it can be by telemedicine if need be, if it's something to do with cats, and that's no referral from the vets. So the next 2 appointments I've got at the moment are behavioural appointments, so they must be referred by a vet. So if a client comes to me and says, my cat is inappropriately urinating or my dog is aggressive, what the process is, I ask them to book, first of all, a discovery call with me. Complimentary 15-minute phone call, and it's basically for them to briefly describe to me what the issues are that they're having, and then for me to then describe to them the different appointments that I have, and then for us to work together to see what appointment would be advisable for that caregiver and the pet. Because if I was just to put my prices out online to everybody, the majority of people, either, it's the human nature thing, is if you've got 3 things, you always go for the middle one, or you'd always go for the cheaper one, especially if you're in Scotland, and we're known to be cheapskates. So a lot of people would probably pick the cheapest one, but it's not actually suitable for that animal and for that caregiver. So by speaking to them and explaining to them, right, your dog has long-term aggressive type tendencies, this isn't something that's going to be fixed in a very brief telemedicine appointment. It would be best if we went to the full clinical animal behaviour appointment, where it means then we can have a right good deep dive. So the 2 different types of appointments that I've got at the moment, and because we're still in very early stages, this can be obviously adjusted as necessary to see how things are working. But at the moment, it seems to work out quite well, is that I have a hour-long appointment, which is purely by telemedicine, can be for cats only, or can be for dog owner caregivers as well. And then I have an up to 2-hour-long clinical animal behaviour appointment, which can be in person or telemedicine. Both of those appointments, first of all, require the client to complete a quite extensive questionnaire, because I think a lot of the information that I can get won't necessarily be verbalized by the caregiver at the time of the appointment. And if I get them to complete this questionnaire, it's like starting from the minute they got their dog or cat, and it goes through the history, and it's just, it can throw up some sort of red flags to me as to, did they realise this? Did they realise that? I then obviously, because it's been a referral, get permission from the caregiver to get their vet history. So then between the questionnaire and the history, I can then look at the two of them together and go, okay, what's going on here? What things are possible red flags? Where could this possibly have started? What could have been the triggers? And then I discuss that with the client either in person or on telemedicine. And then if it's something to do with, say, dogs, and it's a behavioural issue, like, for example, I've had one recently where the dog is biting and being aggressive, and it wasn't actually, it was quite a young dog, and it was getting frustrated, and it was taking its frustration out on the caregivers. And I mean, it was doing a lot of damage to the caregiver's arms, etc. But what it meant was that the caregivers needed more understanding as to why the dog was being frustrated. So because the dog was there with me, I could show them things like how to settle the dog down, to start off the settle routine. I could discuss with them different toys and show them different things for snuffling and sniffing, etc. So they could go away and start to introduce these things. And that then makes it a lot more personal. I mean, they could probably find a lot of this information online, but a lot of people, A, don't know what they're looking for, and B, don't know how to actually implement that. So for that example, it's going to be, they've gone for the full clinical animal behaviour appointment, which is the 2-hour-long appointment plus a follow-up. But I will be dropping them emails of different parts of the plan over the next 6 weeks, rather than saying to them, here you go, here's one big massive plan, go away and start this, and they start to be overwhelmed and get frustrated. It's like, here, start these couple of things. First thing was safeguarding, muzzle training, because if this dog is, even though it's not being aggressive as in it wants to chew your head off, it's still doing a lot of damage. It's being quite difficult to handle. So the first thing we need to do is complete some safeguarding issues, which is, let's muzzle train the dog. So if you do have to take it out for a walk, then nobody's going to get bitten through these aggression type tendencies, through the frustration. Then the next thing was, let's talk about the settle routine. And then from then on, for the next couple of weeks, I'll be dropping them an email with the next part of the plan. And then we'll follow up at the end of the 6-8 weeks or so to say, right, how are things going? Do you need to carry on with more appointments? And how are things going? And always sort of keep touching base. I think this is another thing that is a struggle at the moment, is trying to realise, get my bosses to realise that it's not just a one appointment and you're finished. That's it, end of story. It's like you have to do a lot of research beforehand, you have to do the appointment, you have to do follow-ups. And I've got to admit, at the moment, I am in the transition stage of trying to do more behaviour and do less nursing. So time seems to be my biggest factor at the moment, in that I struggle to fit all this in, because obviously I am a consulting nurse. There's appointments being booked for me as a consulting nurse, while I'm still trying to fit in behaviour appointments, which then I have to do the research for. So I'm finding I am having to do a lot of that in my own time at the moment. I have been very lucky to have been given some admin time each week to do it, but it's never enough. But I'm hoping eventually that I will stop doing my nursing appointments and just do behaviour appointments, triage training, behavioural healthcare appointments, but also client education. Because one of the other things I've done recently, not only to promote the behavioural clinic, but also to give the client education, is have a client evening. And it was about how to bring your pet safely, your dog or your cat safely, to the vets, because a lot of people don't realise, again, that there are ways and means that you should be doing this, which is better for the pet and better for the caregiver. Because again, through my nursing, the amount of appointments that I've had cancelled because they can't get the cat in the carrier, or they can't get the dog in the door, and you're just like, it doesn't start within the vet practice, it actually starts at home. So if we can educate the caregivers about how to carrier train, or even just leave the carrier out in the home so they get used to it, and drop treats in it every so often. And again, another thing that caregivers always say to me is, I can't believe the cat goes back in the carrier so quickly when they're in the room. But at home, I can't get it in. And I'm just like, well, think about it. Cats are territorial, self-sufficient solitude survivors. They are territorial. They have their own place that they want to be, and that's home. And all of a sudden, you've taken them out of their home. And the only thing that reminds them of home and smells of home and is home to them in the vet practice now is that carrier. So they automatically want to go back into it. So I get, and so many light bulbs, I can see the light bulbs going off in the caregiver's head. And it's just like, oh, wow, never really thought about that. Same with the how many times you're supposed to feed your cat. It's amazing how many people do not realize that they're supposed to feed their cat a lot more than they're supposed to feed a dog, because they're two completely different species. So it's trying to sort of educate clients, and that's where I want the behavioural service to not only just be appointments, I want it to be client education for that. Yeah. And again, we could do that as a nurse just in normal time, but I think coming from now a nursing and behavioural background is that there's a lot more emphasis on me now to be able to say to people, this is the way we should be doing it, and if you're struggling, I can help you. So here is the education, and if you don't understand it or it's not quite working, then come back to me and we can work on that as well.
Yeah, sounds like you've had a busy time. I mean, I think setting up a behavior service, and I speak from kind of my own experience because I did exactly the same. I set up a behavior service within my own general practice. I guess for me, it was a bit different in that I was able to sort of determine how I wanted to do it myself. And obviously you've got, because you're working for a practice, you know, there's, I think, a lot more kind of justification needed and how you're going to set it up. And exactly that, I'm going to need time to go through questionnaires to, you know, figure out like, what are we actually going to do with this particular patient, and then building in the client education pieces. So I think, you know, even though we've done the same thing, it's perhaps been through a slightly different lens. But so one of the things I was curious to chat about is, what have been your sort of main struggles? Has it been that the understanding or the creating the awareness within the practice owners what you need from a behavior service, or where do you think your biggest challenges have been?
There's many challenges. Every day can be a bit frustrating just now, but I think that's just life as well, and you just have to get on with it. But you can also learn from those frustrations. So initially, when I did start the behavioural service, I didn't have any admin time, and I basically called my line managers in month 1, month 3, and then eventually at month 6. And at the last meeting, I said to them, I can't do this. I am literally going home. I'm working 3 days a week, but I'm spending those other 2 days at home writing reports, researching for appointments, and I'm not being paid for that. And let's be realistic here. It's just like, I just can't physically do it. So that has when admin time has been brought in, which is absolutely fantastic. So it is a learning experience for them as well, is that they need to realize how much goes into an appointment. It's also been quite frustrating with clients that want the quick fix as well. And I am very much a low stress, fear-free kind of veterinary professional, is that if they want a quick fix and they want to use prong collars, e-collars, stuff like that, then I am not the person for them. I obviously again try to educate them as to why. You may go to somebody and you may get the jumping up or the biting fix straight away, but you're just then building up a ticking time bomb that dog will then obviously then start to feel more and more pressured by the aversives that are being used. So there has been a couple of appointments where I've done a discovery call and we've realized that it's not going to work. There's no point in proceeding because the client wants something fixed, and they want it fixed, and they want a guarantee, which you can't, and they want a time scale. They want it fixed by this certain time, and I'm like, can't guarantee that either. So that can be very, very difficult. But then obviously the other ways of looking at it is then you have the successes. I've had success stories where I've had a client that had a lurcher that was constantly looking at itself, and it was just like excessive. It had broken its skin, it was bald, and the poor dog, they were suffering because of it. And I was just like, right, let's do an appointment, let's do a questionnaire. Turns out the dog had previous injuries, so we advised long-term pain relief, went to acupuncture, and the dog eventually stopped licking, the hair grew back, etc., stuff like that. So again, that was the good collaboration between, right, I think you should not only speak to your vet, but you should maybe look at other analgesic avenues like acupuncture, stuff like that as well. And then another case as well, I had a beautiful beautiful Cocker Spaniel who was booked in for me for aggressive type tendencies, really struggling. The owners were really, really struggling to deal with it. And the first thing I said was, well, looking at your history, when I was speaking to them on the discovery call, looking at your history, you've not been seen by a vet recently. You would have to be referred to by me, by your vet. But also I think it would be a good reason for going to your vet anyway is to make sure that there's nothing going on there medically, because if there is something medically involved, we need to get that sorted first of all. And they went to their vets and the dog was found to have horrendous lip fold dermatitis.
Oh.
And it was in horrendous amount of pain. And so because of that, then he was obviously going to have to come in for an operation. But the problem was he was so aggressive, because of probably due to the pain and now a learned behaviour, is that neither the owners or the vet professionals would probably be able to get near him in a safe way, because obviously if he was sore there, the last thing you want to do is try and put a muzzle on in a sort of rushed way. So the first part I did with them for a clinical animal behaviour appointment was, right, let's do muzzle training. And let's do muzzle training while he's on his analgesia preoperatively, in order for him to then feel less pain, and then we can do a muzzle training exercise with him. So we basically got a muzzle trained before the operation, and then after his operation, the caregiver said straight away what a huge difference. Honestly, we'd never have thought it was a pain related thing. So it was fantastic in that respect. Then obviously we were keeping him pain free through analgesia. If he was come back into the vets, they were happy to muzzle him because he was quite happy to be put on his muzzle. And then we started to work on how to change those behaviours and move away from trying to dominate the dog, as in take things off him, stuff like that. Let's redirect. So it was a really good collaboration again with the vet practice, with the caregiver and myself, to try and look at this in a real sort of holistic fashion. And that's what makes up for the frustrations where you're just like, no, this is not working. But certainly it's a learning experience for everybody. And I'm, as I say, I'm only 5 months down the road of building this clinical behaviour referral service, and I'm learning all the time and I'm adjusting all the time. And then because of that, I'm then speaking to others where I can also then get help from others. So I'm getting mentoring, etc. And this is the good thing as well, is that by working through towards an accreditation in clinical animal behaviour, it doesn't mean that I finished university and that's it, I'm on my own. I now have mentors trying to work through cases, etc. Because at the moment, to be honest with you, I feel like a student nurse all over again. It's like going back to the beginning and like imposter syndrome is horrendous at the moment, because I have all this knowledge, but I don't feel like I'm doing the job properly. So it's always good for me to be reassured by mentors and peers that are in the same position, and working together to try and actually make things better for everybody.
Yeah, it's that clinical experience piece, isn't it? And I think you're absolutely right. When I first started the veterinary behaviour, the work, it was exactly the same. I felt exactly the same way. It's like, oh my God, have I not been a vet for 20 years already? Like, what am I doing? But it's such an underrepresented field, and it's a very different type of way of working. As you've just explained, the consultations are different. How we're looking at things are different. The way that we're having to interact with the caregivers are different. So it definitely is that kind of steep learning curve at the beginning. So yeah, absolutely, I get it. And I think you've highlighted there, just in a couple of cases that you've mentioned, again, that importance of that collaboration piece between the veterinary clinic and the behaviourists. And again, I just feel so strongly that veterinary nurses are in such an ideal position to be able to be that bridge. And I also sometimes think that the caregivers are much more likely to maybe divulge, detailed information about their pet's behavior to a nurse than maybe they are to a vet, especially if it's not a veterinary behaviorist. For example, if they come to see me, they know they're coming to see me because of their behavior. However, when they're coming to see me when I'm doing general practice work, or when I was doing general practice work, they're so much more likely to talk about behavior. And we know that from research and a number of studies that behavioral presentations are the last thing that people will actually speak to a vet about. So I think, again, it's really, really, really a great thing for veterinary nurses to kind of get into. So I guess I've got kind of two final questions. The first question would be, do you feel that in the long run, this is going to be a viable business or a viable financial option for a practice owner? Do you think this is going to be a valuable service to add on to all the other veterinary services that we provide? And how do you feel that sort of fitting into, I guess, a general practice sort of, working in that way? And I'll save the final question for after you've answered that one, I think.
No problem. Well, I certainly hope it will be, because it is, as I say, what I plan to do. But at the end of the day, if we were to do our job properly throughout the profession and teach our caregivers all the information that they know for them to be behaviourally aware with their puppies and kittens, then yes, I would be out of a job. But unfortunately, it's just not possible, is it? From a veterinary point of view, we can't give all the information out at the beginning. Caregivers might not be pliable to learning all the things. And as I say, the classic example is when I'm doing Healthy Pet Club checks, 6 months checks, and I go through a little brief history. What's your dog or cat fed on? What is your, how much exercise do they get, etc. And it really surprises me that very rarely do I come across a cat that's fed more than twice a day, because they just don't know. And that information is out there, wildly available, particularly through iCat Care, etc. And all that information is there, but caregivers don't know. They just assume. So if we were to educate them at the beginning, then we wouldn't have the issues. But unfortunately, that just doesn't seem to happen, or doesn't seem to happen well enough. So that's what I think will keep me and other behavioural professionals in a job. And it's at the end of the day, these issues are going to come about for multi-cat households that are all being fed in one big mass together. They have one or two litter trays and they're all lined up together. People just don't know any different. So we really need to keep up with the education, and hopefully maybe in years to come, clinical animal behaviourists will be out of jobs because of that. But there will always be issues. There will always be these one-time triggers that happen that change behavioural outcomes, isn't it? So we have to think about that as well. And so my aim, I don't think it'll ever happen in my career, but my sort of blue sky thinking would be, it would be lovely to have in every vet practice or vet practice group in an area a clinical animal behaviourist built within the practice, because then it just shows you that it's as important as having an orthopaedic surgeon. It's just as important as having an ophthalmologist. We should have a clinical animal behaviourist as well. So I don't see there being any reason for there not to be. It would be lovely if everybody was educated enough that we would be out of a job. But as I say, things happen, dogs fight, dog then becomes nervous and aggressive type tendencies. So I think you're always going to be in a job. And as I say, I think I'm hoping in my respect that it will be for the next 10, 15 years, my main job. And I'm going to look at it from both angles. It's going to be both the behavioural, but also the education as well.
Yeah, I love that. I completely agree with you. I think I've never been busier than I am right now. These cases, I completely agree. These cases will always come around, even if the education is there. I think one of the things that I found in my practice that's been such a game changer, has been so valuable, is integrating the behavior side of things actually into the practice. So, using different ways of handling pets when they're in the practice, especially if they're fearful, and making that real connection. Just today we had a home visit to take blood from 3 animals that are all traveling to Australia. That means 2 dogs and 1 pussycat all needed to have 10 mils of blood taken from them. And the 2 dogs are both my behavior patients. So, and one of them in particular is really, really nervous and very, very touch sensitive. And so the vet that ended up going out to the appointment and myself, we ended up coming up with a pre-visit plan, and we did it at home because that was going to be the best way of doing it. And we came up with a pre-visit plan that did include pre-visit pharmaceuticals, but even things like, the vet that went to the home, she didn't wear scrubs because we know that the one dog particularly, just responded negatively to that sort of thing. We told the caregivers how to set things up so that it was going to be the least stressful for us going in. And then, yes, we did give very, very good medication combinations, which I think made all the difference. But so that's again where that crossover lies, having somebody in the practice who's able to advise on some of these things, even if it's management and preparation. How are we going to go about this to make this the least stressful for everybody involved, and to actually get things done, because these pets need to have those blood tests done because they're going to be traveling. But we don't want to focus just on getting the job done and the task. We also want to focus on getting the job done in a way that's going to really be okay for everybody involved, and not cause learning that's going to then impede future visits. So I think that's somewhere in my practice, certainly, where there's such value to be had from having a behavioral approach. And I think that's, Nikki, where I see it as well, your value being as a nurse in that position. Absolutely, you're speaking to the caregivers, but you're also going to be that bridge between the veterinary team and the caregivers that's going to bring that whole thing together. So yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I see this being such a great model for how things can be done, which leads me to my final question. I think you're inspiring veterinary nurses, across the country, if not globally, with the way that you're doing things and the way that you're setting things up. What would be your advice? And I'm sure I asked you a similar question in our last podcast, but what would be your advice to a nurse that's listened to this podcast today and thought to themselves, oh my God, this is exactly what I want to do? What would be your advice to them? What would you say?
If you have the passion, then absolutely go for it. And again, because there are nurses out there that are doing behaviour clinics, etc., within practice, but I'm hoping in years to come, and hopefully within my career time, that you will only be able to do behaviour if you are accredited, etc. But even if not, just learning CPD, things like what you're talking about. I mean, I am fear-free elite status. I am in the midst of doing my dog-friendly individual. I'm low-stress handling, and yet so many people within the profession don't look at these things as important, but they're super duper important. We are a cat-friendly practice accredited clinic, so everybody should be looking at all the information that iCatCare send out, just handling gently, softly. Don't just put care on a record for a dog or a cat. Care tells you nothing. I mean, everybody knows when I've seen a cat or a dog, because the notes at the side for the patient says FAS2, doesn't like to come out of carrier, etc. Because it gives you a lot more information than care or animal bites. So that is something that I definitely want to, we're trying to improve within the corporate that I'm in. We do have a little behaviour group set up now, and we are trying to look into more of these things to be widespread and normal, instead of just being a sort of niche thing. And gentle handling should not be niche. No. Proper labelling of a patient's record should not be niche. So if you're interested in it, look at all the schemes that are out there: dog friendly, cat friendly, fear free, low stress. I am in the midst of training to be better, because I had some knowledge, but I didn't feel I was knowledgeable enough to actually teach it yet. I had some training on the pet prep initiative, which is for cooperative care, because I would love clients to come in, and again, that collaboration between client, vet professional and pet, to be able to say, right, we work with cooperative care, so the dog will tell us when they're not happy about something, instead of pinning a dog down to get it done. It's so frustrating that even after 25 years of being qualified, that people just think if we just scruff them, if we just pin them down, get the job done, great. But what about the next time? What about the next time when they turn around to come back and the cat or the dog remembers, and they're then more spicy or more vicious? And again, that's another big bugbear of mine, is that we shouldn't be labelling our pets or other people's pets in that way either. So if we can educate our professionals to think a bit more behaviourally aware, and even if you don't want to go down the route of being a full clinical animal behaviourist, then that's fine, it's not a problem. But look at all these extra educational resources that are out there. Things like the courses that you have released yourself, your Think Dog, your Think Cat. These are all things that professionals can look at and go, oh, never thought about that. Never thought to handle a cat in this way, handle a dog in that way. Never thought about emotions. It's all fine and well thinking about the broken leg, but what about the broken brain? We'll have to think about that as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. And what a great place to end this conversation. And yeah, thank you for mentioning. So Learn to Speak Dog and Learn to Speak Cat, which I'll put in the show notes. But finally, Nikki, where can people find you if they're in Edinburgh or with any sort of other work that you're doing? Where's the best place that people can get hold of you?
I am very much a social media geek and do like going on my socials. So the best place to find me is probably Feline Fabulous Vet Nursing, which is on Facebook and Instagram. I do talk about lots of things on there, including my behavioural clinic that I'm working through on just now as well. So yeah, all my information is on there.
Perfect. So we will get that put up in the show notes as well, so people can find you if they want to. And thank you so much. Thank you for spending another podcast with me. Thank you so much for chatting me through your most recent venture. And thank you for continuing to inspire, especially veterinary nurses in this space. I just love it. For me, I just wish we could see more of this. So yeah, thank you. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode, which is going to be episode 6. So I'll see you there, and bye for now.